Right, having just said that, I've now turned mine on, so... Okay, right, so item 1 is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of December 2023 that are on pages 4 to 11 of your agenda pack. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes for accuracy only before I sign them off as true and accurate record of the meeting? No comments? Lovely, thank you. Okay, with your permission. There you are, Julie. Thank you. So, agenda item 2, actions arising from the minutes, if any. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Under item 5323, I know that all members were encouraged to attend the Treasury Management training. My own feedback was I found that very helpful, though I've been through the process several times, but just like to commend the training that was given, but also whether there's been any other feedback or constructive suggestions to the team. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your feedback on that. We do have training as an item, and if there are any other suggestions, I'll pick that up under that item. But thank you for your positive feedback, Councillor Clark. Any other matters arising from the minutes? No? Thank you. So, item 3, apologies. Julie, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have one apology from Councillor Oliver, and Councillor Plummer is in attendance as his substitute.
Very welcome, Paul. Nice to see you. Okay, no further apologies. Item 4, urgent business. I have none. So we go to item 5, declarations of interest. Do any members of the committee have any interest to declare that they haven't already declared? No? Item 6, non-members wishing to address the meeting. Do we have any members who are not members of the committee?
Alison.
Yes, but she's not a member of the council.
She's a member of the council, Alison.
Oh, sorry, yes. We have the cabinet member, Alison Webb. Yes. You're very welcome, and I think a bit later on we might be joined by Philip Cowan as well. So anyway, you're very welcome, and please feel free to speak on any of the items. Okay. So item 7, training, standing item. Any comments other than the one that Councillor Clark made on training or past or future requirements? No? Lovely, thank you. Which takes us straight on to Mark Hodgson and our external audit update. Mark, you're very welcome. Nice to see you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bill, and good morning, everyone. So I thought we would provide a verbal update talking you through the position of the local audit market across the whole of England, and specifically then what that means for you. So the Minister for the Department of Levelling Up Communities and Housing issued a letter last July expressing how they would wish to reset and recover the local audit market given the difficulties that have been in it for a number of years. And that letter had 2 principles in it. One, to gain as much assurance as possible on historic audit years, but with a second principle of going to the most recent financial information available, which are 2 different things. You can't necessarily do both instantly with limited capacity in the market. So we then issued a letter in December to all Section 151 officers, so to Alison, and then Simon Hoare, who's the new Minister for Levelling Up Communities and Housing, reiterated the ministerial statement in January. We are expecting there to be 3 consultations that were due to be issued this week, but they haven't emanated yet. But those 3 consultations set out how auditors and councils effect the reset and the recovery process. So the reset, in essence, is to fast forward to 23-24 as the most recent financial year with the most recent financial information, with some backstop dates put in place to close all historic years prior to that. So all audits through and including 22-23 to be completed, and I'll go into more detail what completed means, by a consultation date which would be the 30th of September this year. Now, completed means with an ordinary audit and an ordinary audit report, or where it is not possible to do that, to move to a disclaimed audit report. So you cannot do the audit because of X, and X would be a statutory instrument laid before Parliament with the ministerial intent. And then that kind of resets the clock, and then we go into a recovery phase through the next 5 years, and I'll talk about what that means. What it would mean for you would be that your 22-23 financial year, the financial statements as it stands would not be subject to audit in the normal course of action, but we would be doing value for money arrangements work, which underpins kind of all of the council's processes, which does include financial reporting, so you get some assurance that the financial reporting mechanisms worked, but there'd be no assurance on the true and fair opinion for the balance sheet and the income and expenditure statement. That does provide some challenges, not least opening balances going into 23-24 if you do not have an opinion on closing balances from the prior year, which are still to be worked through. If you have a disclaimed audit opinion in 22-23, it would take a further 3 years or 3 financial years to completely unwind that opinion through to a clean audit opinion, all things being equal. Because in the first year after that, you'd have an opening balance issue. The second year after that, you'd have a closing balance issue. Third year after that, you'd have potential for transactions going through the income and expenditure statement. As a committee and as members, I think what is key to focus on is that a disclaimed audit opinion would be a discrete paragraph within the audit report saying we cannot do the audit because of X, and X is the ministerial statement directing us to fast forward. And then in subsequent years it would be we couldn't get assurance over opening balances because of X, going back to that ministerial statement. I would then focus on the rest of the audit report and what that says, because if there's nothing else in there qualifying the accounts, then you have got the assurance on those statements that you would need ordinarily. But I think you have to get your heads around the fact that audit reports for 3 or 4 years would have the moniker of qualified over them. Now, that is clearly not an ideal position to be in, but the whole sector is not in an ideal position. And to break the cycle, this is the Minister's way of doing so. Now, I didn't come into public sector audit not to issue audit opinions, but if we are being directed to get to the most recent financial information and get the whole of England's audits back on track going forward, then this is a pragmatic route to doing so.
Okay.
I'm happy to go into questions because there's a lot of detail, and you could. I'm sure.
Before I take questions from the committee, can I just ask a couple of questions? So, firstly, this isn't as a result of the performance of Breckland Council. This is noises off, as it were, elsewhere in the system around capacity of the audits. Is that correct?
That is correct. There has been no issues with the audit here.
Right.
That have led to delays.
Well, that's really good to hear. So I wanted that recorded in the meeting.
And we are as up to date as we possibly can, having given an opinion on the 21-22 financial statement.
And I also understand that some local authorities have several years' worth of audits outstanding, and that is contributing to the national situation. Is that right?
I think as at the 31st of December, there were 771 audit opinions outstanding across multiple years, and there are councils that have multiple years outstanding within that number.
Fine, thank you. So compared to a lot of authorities, we would be the ones with the best audit record, I suppose.
I would changed that a little bit to say you have the most up-to-date assurances over your financial statements compared to a number of others. Yes, you can interpret
That's
what
why
I said
you earn
earlier.
the big bucks, yes. Fine. Alison.
Chairman, I don't know if you switched your tilbroom on when you...
No, it is on.
Oh, good. But
Yeah.
a very important statement. It's just that the gentleman switched on. I didn't see you switch it off, so I was
Right.
just checking. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Webb. Thanks very much for your statement, which is drawing attention to the Minister's direction, which is no reflection on the work that we've been doing here over many years. That's helpful, and that should be said. I think you did mention value for money. Presumably, outside the Minister's direction, if there's something that the committee itself wish to look at retrospectively or prospectively in terms of value for money, or a relationship to, say, the risk register, etc., that's something which we would not be prevented from doing on our own initiative. Thank you.
Yeah, a good question. So, as part of the Minister's intentions, we will be doing all value for money work through to 22-23, and we'll be reporting that in an interim report to you in April this year. So that will be up to date. So you will have assurance as a committee that your underlying arrangements as a council either are in place or there were weaknesses. There have never been any weaknesses to date, and we are completing that work now. Clearly, as a committee and as a council, you are able to gain assurance from other sources, colleagues to my right in internal audit, if you thought there was a gap in where you needed assurance. Now, they can't do an audit of the financial statements, so I wouldn't put that on Teresa. But if you thought there was a governance area where you needed more assurance, then that would be, as you say, entirely in your remit to do. But you can't go out and appoint another auditor. You can't have financial statements. The Minister's direction is Teresa.
Thank you. Any other members, questions or comments for Mark? Robert.
I thought, Mark, you said at a previous meeting that there won't be a specific value for money opinion. Was that the case?
So we had the audit code did change. So it used to be there was a positive value for money conclusion. You have appropriate arrangements in place. 2 years ago, that changed to we report by exception. There are other matters within our audit report. So the nuance has changed. So there will be other matters we will be reporting whether you have other matters or not in our audit report for 22-23 and then 23-24. That will form part of the disclaimed audit opinion wording. That has not changed, just the nuance between positive against negative assurance.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on item 8? Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Mark, and we'll see what the future holds. It is a somewhat surprising development, I think, but anyway, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 9, the Q4 Strategic Risk Report, and to introduce that we have the Cabinet Member, Alison Webb.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. Okay, I'm delighted to bring the Q4 Risk Report to Governance and Audit today to provide an overview of the Council's risk landscape. This has been a static period for the Council, with the overall risk scores changing minimally since the committee last saw them. The most notable change to the risk scores relates to the lowering of the waste consultation impact rating. This is because we have now more information how the proposed changes will be funded. The risk level still does remain elevated, and you'll find more detail on this in the notes. It is a positive that further information is becoming available in relation to this risk, as it allows us to better shape our response and way forward to the changes. Members of the committee will also note that some of the risks are now approaching their target date of April. The team will be looking at these risks along CMT and making an assessment to see if they meet the threshold for a strategic threat to our organisation. Some risks, such as cybersecurity and the delivery of the corporate plan, will always meet this criteria, so we'll have their targets extended until next year. This is not to say work won't be done to reduce these risks further. It's just because of their nature, they will need to remain on the strategic risk register in some form. Finally, members will note that the slight format change to the report in relation to key risk and control indicators. As discussed, when we brought this report to you last time, we have expanded this section to demonstrate change between these indicators in order to give a better picture of the risk direction of travel. Myself and Ryan are very happy to answer any questions. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, over to you. Yes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thank you very much for putting that trend in the risk register around demand for housing services. It's really helpful, that. It does actually just highlight the severity of the issue, though, doesn't it? Where you've got, if I've read it right, 10, on average 10 new cases per working day. It's, yeah. Just on page 19. So again, just so I understand it correctly, where we've got the final row there, total monthly income of temporary accommodation. So we've got income and expenditure there. So is the income from housing benefits? Is that where the, yeah, right, okay. So the net cost is £37,000. Thank you. And then finally on page 20, just a note really where, in terms of nutrient neutrality, one of the potential consequences is the impact on planning fees. Just to note that planning fees have increased by between 25% and 35% since December. So presumably the impact actually becomes greater because the level of income is, if we had had that income, it would have been a higher level. So just to keep a note on that. Thank you.
Do you want to comment at all?
Yeah, on the first point around the temporary accommodation, that's completely correct what you've said, Mr. Fowler. And then on nutrient neutrality, I'll try and include something in the next quarter's report just to reflect that. But I appreciate your comments. We'll put that in there moving forwards.
Can I just add, also on temporary accommodation, it's not just Breckland Council that are actually facing this challenge with temporary accommodation. There's councils all over the country which have got the same issues, which you're all aware of, you see on the television. So I just wanted to put that point in. It's not just Breckland.
Thank you. Robert, over to you.
Overall, the strategic risk register mirrors the risks identified in the strategic internal audit plan, with one exception, which is on page 75, the medium strategic risk relating to climate change. And I understand the internal arrangements for that in terms of being delegated down to individual officer delivery or control. It's something I think we need to keep an eye on within the risk register in order to understand it.
So in terms of the climate risk, there's sort of two elements to it. One was in terms of the strategic one. So we took a review to CMT a couple of quarters ago, and what we decided was we had a specific strategic risk around the Breckland 2035 section of the corporate plan, but we didn't have a strategic risk around other areas of the corporate plan. So that risk was slightly altered in the risk register to cover off it more generally. So that risk is still a risk to the organisation. The risk itself has just been expanded to include other areas. In terms of the climate one and its place in the strategic audit plan, there's no issues. We've got our end. We're completely happy with that as well. I think, were you just going to say about?
Yeah, I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this, and basically the climate side of things now has been embedded into the organisation, and it's not just one person's responsibility to do the changes going forward for climate change, it's everybody's in the organisation. So that's the way it was seen, and I think, as I said, that's a good way of going forward.
So as a follow-up, could we see what the instruction is to how each individual department is to deal with it, please? Either as after this meeting, information probably.
Happy to do that, thank you.
Okay. You happy with that? Harry.
Thank you very much, Chairman. About 2 or 3 areas just wanted to ask to Councillor Webb and to Ryan. 3 areas, they relate really to some areas which are beyond our actual direct control, but will impact on the ability of us to actually deliver some of our corporate objectives in the corporate plan, the refreshed corporate plan, and particularly also aspects of inspiring communities, which is coming to Cabinet on this Monday on the 12th, some of which I appreciate are outside our remit, but I preface my remark by asking, although these may not be a strategic risk at the moment, is asking the corporate management team to keep this under review in a number of areas. One is the renewal or not of the household support fund by government and any sort of index linking improvements of that. The second one, which is also related, not in a way to the housing side, is also the disabled grant facilities that we get passed down, and the recent announcement yesterday, which is around not increasing its linking in terms of going forward. That's one issue, and there will also be potential issues should some of our hopeful commercial sales of property, not go through. And some of those things I know have all been factored into the 24-25 draft budget, and the assumptions that things will be going forward. So some things are a lower risk, but they only become a higher risk if they don't happen. So I'm really just flagging it up to the CMT at this stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments, Councillor. Yeah, they're things we're aware of, and some of those will be captured under some elements of the risk, if not specifically. So the corporate plan delivery one will obviously capture stuff around household support and the DFGs. In terms of commercial sales, that would obviously be impacted by the medium-term financial plan, but I'm happy to pass your comments on to CMT with regards to the flagging.
Well done. Okay. I haven't got anybody else who's indicated a wish to speak. Any members? Do you want to come back, Robert?
Yeah, just going to this strategic risk on emerging national government changes. That's one individual has that risk. So how do they monitor the flow of information from government?
So that's owned by Jack Fulham, who's within the policy team at the organisation. So that's owned by the policy team in general, who'll cover off briefings and stuff like that. The way which we're managing that risk, and we have done previously, is, a good example that we were discussing the other day was the procurement bill. At the moment, that's covered by that emerging change risk, but if needs be, as we saw with nutrient neutrality and potentially something like the procurement bill, we would break that off into a separate risk, and that would then be jointly owned by the policy team and by the subject matter expert. So for the procurement bill, that would be the contracts and procurement manager. So it's one individual which is on the risk, but there is a whole team behind that. It's just one individual is the subject matter expert for dealing with the risk in terms of pulling together this report.
And I think the main issue with nutrient neutrality was it wasn't subject to prior consultation. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's perfectly true. It arrived. Exactly, to much to everybody's surprise, yes. Okay, members, the recommendation is to note the report. Are you happy to do that? Thank you very much. Okay, and thank you very much. Okay, so we go on to item 10 on page 43 of your agendas, which is the Audit Committee self-assessment exercise. Teresa Sharman is here. to lead us in this. Now, we were sent a questionnaire as members, and some people have sent it back, but I think the exercise that we propose to do this morning is for us, for Teresa to take us through the questions and for us to agree as a committee how we would like to score it so that she can then submit a report on behalf of the committee. So, Teresa, over to you.
Yes, so it's good practice to do a self-assessment on yourselves and your work and your performance. So this is what the questionnaire from the SIPFA document is about. So if we go to page 46, we're going to go through some of these questions and collectively see if we're happy with the scores that were collated from those that were sent in, or whether we do need to amend some. So there's some which are very obvious, which I'll skate over, but we'll go to the ones where I think we can discuss. So number one, we know we have an audit committee, so happy with that being a 5. Number 2, you report to full council, I think, so happy with that being a 5. The one about number 3, the guidance talks about that you are an advisory role, not decision making. So it talks about it's not so keen for you to approve the annual accounts and the annual governance statement, which I think, just having a very quick look at your terms of reference, you do. Now it doesn't say you can't, but it is indicating that perhaps you shouldn't, because you shouldn't have decision making kind of a role.
I mean, I think we make a recommendation to full council, don't we? And it's for full council to sign it off.
That would be, if you do that, that would be good, and it might just be a tweak in the terms of reference, just to make that clear that we're recommending for approval rather than approving both of them, which would be fine.
Alison.
Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. On certain things, such as the Treasury Management, it is a recommendation to full council. However, under the terms of reference currently, the accounts and the AGS, the annual governance statement, are delegated to this authority. So that could
this
be
committee.
Something. This committee. Even so that could be something that we look to change to a recommendation if you wanted to.
Well, in terms of where audit and governance, I suppose with audit, if we're talking about best practice, that things are referred to full council. But in terms of governance, if full council wants to delegate governance decisions to us, I wouldn't necessarily want to send them straight back to full council. So does the committee have any strong opinion in this area? No. Okay, so I think we'll have a look at it, and I think we'll just have to check with the but in principle, things, as you say, the principle of things being recommended for full council to approve. What I just don't want to do is to then make things difficult to happen in a timely way, because they have to then go to full council. So perhaps bearing that in mind, we could just have a look at that. Back to you, Teresa.
So we could just take a little action, because there'll be actions that come out of this, so we just have a little action just to confirm that.
So, Robert, you now want to come in.
So full council normally just notes the minutes of this committee, but would it, in this particular instance, be useful for full council to formally approve those minutes?
Well, we have to approve our own minutes, don't we? Let's see what Alison comes up with, shall we?
Okay, number 4 is about the terms of reference, setting out the purpose of the committee. I think, again, Julian, I think maybe that would need updating, so we might want to drop down to a 3 on that. We think potentially the terms of reference will need a bit of a whiz through to make sure we do comply now with.
After Mark's excitement earlier on. So,
so I might suggest we number 4 drops down to a 3.
Okay, is the committee happy with that?
Just to make.
Okay.
Number 5, probably look at members to confirm that they believe that is a 5.
Does anybody like to score theirs less than a 5? No. Fine. Okay. Comment from Robert.
Well, we've made sort of annual training a statutory duty on members of this committee, and on that basis, I'd keep it at its current 5 level.
Okay.
Number 6 is about, do you escalate your concerns to those in governance and leadership roles? So again, look for you to say that you're happy with that and you do that.
Well, we have called senior members of the management team to the committee to explain overruns on dates and things in the past. So, yes, I think we're happy with that.
Number 7 is about...
And we've threatened to as well, sorry. So they haven't always needed to come because they've sorted it out. So, sorry.
Yes, so number 7 is about the governing body, that being the full council, holds audit committee to account for its performance annually. And I think you do your annual report, which presumably does that go up to full council for them to note or to receive?
Well, other than the signing off of the accounts, which do we need to look at that? I haven't had any. Alison, sorry.
I could incorporate that in the other action, if you like, because it's a similar point to the last one. So if you like, I can include them both.
So is that, have you met X number of times a year, those sorts of things?
This one is more about you produce a report annually, but at the moment it's only yourselves that consider that. Although the minutes are then at full council for information. Yeah. So I could just look at whether that is sufficient or whether you would
and
want
by
to...
going to full council, the mechanism of that is that any member of the council can ask questions or probe that report because it's gone to full council.
Yes, that's correct.
So they don't necessarily have to agree it, but they can scrutinise it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm tempted to leave that where it is then in that case. Teresa.
So number 8 is then about the content of your annual report. Again, we could take an action just to go through that and see whether you do the detail that they're asking, and obviously we can make sure that your next one does. So
okay.
We could leave that as a 5 and obviously take the action, do any amendments as needed. And then we get on to the functions of the committee. So this talks about the committee's terms of reference and whether they cover the points that are listed there. I think potentially there are a couple of new areas that won't have been in the old SIT for guidance, and therefore there will be some bits missing that we might just need to update. But again, we could take an action to do that for the next time they come.
Do you have any examples?
I think the ethics and standards might be a new point in there, and I'm pretty sure value for money would still have been in there. I think it's mainly the ethics and the assurance framework. There probably won't have been so much emphasis on that last time.
Okay.
So just a couple of bits that we might just need to check what you've got in there, and if you haven't got anything, just add in what the SIT for guidance might suggest to make sure that we cover off everything in terms of reference.
Okay. Robert's indicated, and
we certainly have a role in terms of being the appeal body for any standards issues, which also goes back to item 1 in terms of there's a slight overlap there. But as regards ethics, which is next to Suffolk, I don't think we specifically considered that as a body.
I mean, it says ethics and standards, doesn't it? So, you know, is that materially different? Okay, I mean, we've got...
I think, and the question is whether ethics goes beyond those, the code for public standards.
I think we would need, if we were to take ourselves in a whole new direction, we'd probably need the agreement of full council to do that. Teresa?
I think some of this is about, if you think about what audit committee is all about, and upholding the Nolan principles and the ethical values and behaviour, I think is what it's trying to drive at. So not that I don't think it says anything about reviewing like ethics codes or anything like that, but we should be driving ethical behaviour as an audit committee in what the council does. But I think if we take that action just to look at what it says in the guidance, of what should be covered in the terms of reference of what your role is, and then see how we can reflect that, and we can maybe come back next time and say what if there is a change that we all need to be aware of, I suppose.
Okay, I mean, because I think ethics is quite a political word. So, for example, do you have an ethical foreign policy or an ethical investment policy? They are political decisions, whereas the question of standards in public life is, you know, do you behave in a right and proper way? I'm keen that we don't get dragged into an area where we're making political decisions, because those are for cabinet and full council, but we are upholding this idea of decent, you know, standards in public life. Linda, you wanted to come in.
Yes, just that I would point out that that's the third bullet point under the words internal control arrangements, including. I would see that as meaning that full council will discuss ethics if it sees fit.
Yeah.
Our job is to make sure that whatever full council has decided is our ethical code, we make sure that we're sticking to it and that we have the means to flag it up if we don't think that it's being stuck to.
Okay, I think that's very clearly put. No, absolutely. And in that case, I would, yes, I think that's. So, Teresa.
Yes, because remember, we're not decision making, so
No.
I just found the bit in here, it talks about overseeing the arrangements that are in place to establish and maintain ethical standards and obtain assurance. So we're always overseeing and getting assurance that those things are in place and complied with. So we're very much a monitoring role of some things that happen within the council.
Okay, so when we look at the review of complaints and standards, which we do every year, you know, that would be part of that as well.
Yes, because it might give some assurance that ethical standards are being followed or that they're not. And when you get the AGS, there's probably something in there about ethical standards and conduct as well that would give you some assurance about that as well.
Okay, right, thank you.
Okay. So then number 10, it says in the last year, have all of the above items been considered? So this is you thinking about, have we covered and received reports around value for money, governance, risk, AGS, internal audit, external audit. So if
which we have done, so that's quite straightforward.
Yeah, if you're happy with that, then you stick with your 5. And then number 11 is basically, I think this question's a little bit confusing. I wonder whether it's actually saying, have you stuck to your core items in your agenda, or have you gone outside of your agenda and function?
Okay, so we strayed into other people's territory, is that what they're asking?
Maybe, I think that's what that might be saying, but I think it's a little bit difficult to understand that.
I hope we haven't. Robert?
I guess we did that when we pushed to have governance added to audit, but that's 3 years ago now.
Well, we have done one of these questionnaires since then, haven't we? So in the last period. No.
So we're happy to stick with our 5 on that one then. And number 12 is about, have you met privately with the external auditors and the head of internal audit? And I've not been here long enough to know whether you do a private meeting or not.
So is that the committee or the...
Yes.
No is the answer.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a 1 there anyway, so that would indicate that's something that we need
And should
to do.
we?
We should, yes. It's good
Because
practice.
why would we want to do it in private when we can do it in public?
Because sometimes there might be things that the auditors want to tell the audit committee that and discuss with you before it becomes a matter that goes maybe wider than that.
I've always said there needs to come to the committee.
Private meeting without officers present.
Yes, so the meetings without officers, yes. So you do it as a committee without the officers present.
Oh, I see.
The external auditor and the head of internal audit. And you normally do it when your accounts come, because that's when the external auditors are here and they can talk to you about anything they want to tell you about that's happened in the preparation of the accounts that they might want you to be aware of. So it's good practice for that reason.
Okay, and committee, what do you think?
If
we got
we
you,
did
David.
that without the officers, would it still be a public meeting?
I suppose I don't think you would you know? Because it's supposed to be private. So you do it before your public meeting, before you went live as such.
I would rather have it in the public meeting, personally, and we always have. Sorry, okay, we've got hands everywhere now. So I'm going to take David Wickerson, then Alison, and then Linda.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really a question of private. I mean, in the sense that is a private meeting minuted, for example, and are the minutes therefore part of our package, so to speak? I mean, as councillors, we can have private meetings with the accounts people or anybody we like, but that is just a private discussion, which is not necessarily minuted. But to have a committee meeting in private, that I think raises all sorts of other issues, and I think we ought to remain in the public domain, and our meeting should be therefore minuted and in the public domain, although it's a private meeting. It's just the question of definition of the word private. Thank you.
Alison.
Thank you. I wonder if it's sufficient that you are able to have a meeting privately with either internal or external or auditors or both together. If you choose to do that at any time, you have that option. Personally, I think the fact that you haven't needed to is a good sign, so I find that question a little bit backwards. But the option is there, and the option for external internal audit to come to yourselves with challenges or issues is already there.
Linda.
I'm on a similar line to Alison. It seems to me that if we need to discuss something sensitive, we can have an agenda and put it below the line. So you can still have a committee meeting and talk to the auditors. Now, it might be that the background information that the other side of the room has got might explain this in more detail as something that is important. You should be able to do it. But personally, I'm playing devil's advocate and saying, I think we should be giving ourselves 5 for never having met privately with the external auditors. We're above board. We've never had to. We don't do it. It isn't necessary. And I'd be more suspicious and give us a 1 if we'd been doing a lot of it.
Okay, right. I think we've sort of got some consensus. I think we will take the idea that it is open to members to request a private meeting, and it is over to the officers to also request a private meeting. We'll go on record saying we haven't needed to do that to date, but the mechanism is there, and I think we will accordingly score ourselves a 5 unless the committee say that we shouldn't. Members, you happy with that? Teresa, is that helpful?
Yes, I think it is about the facility, and there is quite a bit on that in the SIPFA documents. I would recommend you read that because it does explain why it might be needed and how that works. But yes, let's go with a 5 because you haven't needed it, but if we know that if we wanted to have one, we could have one.
The committee's door is open and we've minuted this conversation, so anybody can see. It's there in the record. Right.
So, Moving on to 13 then, about membership and support now. So has the committee established separation from executive?
Yeah.
I think you have, yeah. A size that's not too unwieldy.
Yes.
And avoids the use of substitutes. I think you do use substitutes, don't you?
Yes. We have named substitutes who, rather than just pull from...
Rather than
any
anyone
member.
as such, yeah. That's fine then, yeah. Independent members.
We have an independent member, David
yeah.
Fowler.
So they're all right with 5s. 14 is about members are being appointed to ensure that you have knowledgeable and skilled members.
Absolutely.
Then you've got 15 is about your training, evaluated your skills and training. I don't know whether have you done that. It might be something we could do again in the future where we assess the skills that members have and see whether there's any gaps or any training needs. And how when the last time you
Well,
did
we have training as a standing item on all of our agendas for members to request further training or comment on the quality of the training they've received. So I think we have training as an ongoing issue.
Yeah. So that could just be if you ever wanted to do an evaluation and see if anybody had any gaps.
Well, I think we leave it up to the members to self-assess and say if they feel that they need more training in an area.
Okay. And then 16 is about regular
hang on,
training.
Robert wants to come in again.
Yeah.
So on that standard agenda item, if we could add a line if any member wishes to raise a particular area for training.
Well, I do ask that question. So
yeah, I mean, I think we tend to rely on what's prepared for us and fed to us, but I think, particularly when you've got a new member, that you just need to ask.
Right, we'll take that on board.
Yes, 16 is then about that you'd have regular training in place, which I think you're saying you do have that. 17, basically, are you happy that you have a satisfactory level of knowledge? You're happy with that. 18 is about your support, so I think we're happy we've got Julie supports the committee for you. 19 is about do you have good working relationships with key people in the organisation, external audit, internal audit.
I think we have very good.
Happy with that, yeah. And then we're moving on to the effectiveness of the committee now. So has the committee obtained positive feedback on its performance from those it interacts with and who rely on the work? I don't know if you do anything.
We haven't asked, actually. We haven't asked. Maybe we should. Robert, you want to come in?
I mean, we do have non-members come and talk to us on occasions if there's a particular area of concern that they want to know more about, and we haven't had any adverse comment following that engagement.
I was thinking also of officers and professionals who come and talk to the committee, and they find us open. And I tell you what we'll do. I think it's worth doing a questionnaire as a result of this, that we can consider any feedback that should go out to those who interact with the committee on a regular basis. So cabinet members and the people, officers and external professionals, just to see and maybe members who have previously raised an issue with the committee, rather than all members. So let's rather do that. Would the committee be happy to do that? Yeah. Okay. We can take that away as an action.
I've got to do it for another committee, so if I've got to do a survey, put a survey together for one, we might as well do it here as well. So if it makes sense. So 21, are the meetings well chaired? Everyone?
I don't know, that's for the committee.
5. Meetings have a good level of discussion and engagement. I think we're happy with that 5, yeah. Committee maintains a non-political approach to discussions.
Well, I believe so, but do speak up. We have all colours here, so.
And then number 24, we've got 2 scores down here, a 3 and a 5, so you might need to decide which way you want to go. So this is about engaging with a wide range of leaders and managers, including discussions on audit finding and risks. So this might be where you need to think about where do you want to go with that one. Do you feel like you are engaging with other people when you need to about items?
We do when we need to do it.
Yeah.
Did you have the ability to call people in to talk through their findings or talk through their risk in that if you wanted to?
We've certainly done that in the past.
Yeah. Should we go with the 5 then?
Is there anybody who feels that we shouldn't? And this is your questionnaire, members of the committee, so if you feel strongly, please do speak up.
Okay. 25 is about, do you make recommendations for improvement of governance of risk and control arrangements? You're happy with a 5? If you need to make a recommendation to
we do.
management about something that...
But on 27, I think that it is fair to say, have we evaluated as a committee how we're adding value to the organisation? I don't think that's a question we've ever asked. Harry.
Yes, thanks very much. Just going back to number 7, seems a long while ago. I think taking the point that Robert made, obviously councillors at full council at the sort of annual report can ask any questions, but I think my observation is I don't disagree with the scoring of 5 that we had under 7, but we go back to how under 27 how we're adding value. We may think we're adding value, and I'm quite sure we are, and one of the I suppose outputs of that I would think is that I can't recall the reports of this committee being criticised or challenged at full council, because I think this committee, given it's the way we operate in its breadth and its depth, that we are taken seriously, that because we are then saying we've looked at the strategic risk, we're really happy with that. So that will be taken as if you like, as gospel by some members who may not feel, well, we don't really need to ask anything. So it might be that members who aren't on this committee be sort of encouraged to ask themselves the questions like, well, yes, we're satisfied about that, and how that works to their own appreciation. And so I personally think we do add value, but obviously I'm biased being a member of the committee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Robert, you wanted to come in.
Maybe that should be added to the questionnaire going to cabinet members and others, that does the committee add value to the organisation by giving assurances on aspects of accountancy and governance?
I mean, that's what it says on the tin, isn't it? So
yes.
I suppose that's the question we should ask.
Yes. It is about, have you fundamentally improved the governance and risk management and internal control of the organisation, isn't it, in the work that you do? And hopefully through the reports you get, and the way you push them forward, and you try and make sure that everything is done, that you do that. But the second questionnaire looks more at adding value, which we might want to consider doing at some point. But
well, let's add
really
Robert's question to the first one and see what we get back. And in the light of filling in this form, I think it's an area we haven't asked the question. Yeah. So I think the 2 is probably almost generous, to be honest. Yeah. Okay.
Just quickly going back to 26, do you think your recommendations have traction with those in leadership roles? Because we've got the 3 and the 5 there. So maybe there were some people thinking that maybe it didn't, but...
Robert, you wanted to come in.
Well, I think, as was said earlier, the threat of having to present to us is
has produced dramatic results, hasn't it? Yes. So yes, I think.
Go for 5 on that one.
Well, unless anybody wants to say otherwise.
So they're nearly finished. Number 28, do we have an action plan to improve any areas of weakness? Well, we obviously will out of this. There's a few actions, isn't there? But people went for a 3 on that one, so... Did you put 4? Have any action plans?
I'm happy to leave it scored where it is.
Okay. And then number 29, have you done this collaboratively? Well, you're doing that right now, so
Yeah.
the 5 makes sense there.
Robert, you wanted to come in on 28?
I mean, the answer is no, we don't have a plan, but if as the result of the questionnaire any matters were highlighted, then we would put in place a plan to address those issues.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
So we're finished, so we'll tidy that up so that you get a final version that can be circulated around, and there'll be a little action plan that comes out of it for the things that we've talked about, and then we can monitor that through in each meeting as we go through that and report back on whether those have been done or not, Chair.
And just add it to the work plan for the next meeting.
Right, so this is our strategic plan for the period, 3-year period, 24-25 to 26-27, and you've got the annual plan for next year, 24-25. So there's several bits within our report. The first one is the internal audit charter, and this covers, that's at Appendix 1, that covers our purpose, authority and responsibilities. There's no significant changes to that. I think I potentially changed titles, but nothing of any significance, and that's for you to approve again. Secondly, you've got our internal audit strategy at Appendix 2, and this covers our approach to planning, details on our resources and how we assess whether we have enough resources to do the plans, our objectives, the internal audit function, our delivery model is covered in there. And we also detail how the plan links to the Head of Internal Audit annual opinion. And then in Appendix 3, you've got the 3-year strategic plan to look at, so you can see the spread of the audits and why we're doing them and when we're doing them. Appendix 4 is the annual plan, which again gives a bit more detail on when we're going to do them in which quarter. And you'll see there's 202 days that we're delivering. 35 days of those are for the work that ARP do for you, and that's 16 audits. And then Appendix 5 is your assurance, high-level assurance maps for your top 5 corporate risks. I haven't done much on those since Faye did them for you last time. What I'd like to do for them, if there's time, all of them, but at least for one of them, is to do a much more detailed assurance map, so it takes it from that high level, and for each line of assurance, if you see it, we go into a bit more detail and look at where are you specifically getting assurance from, which I think will be good to do some assurance mapping and get into that assurance framework part of your terms of reference. The other thing I'd like to do next year is think more about the use of data analytics and maybe have a data analytics strategy. So the contractor does use data analytics, and I think ARP do for the work that they do for you as well, but the contractor doesn't use it as much, so I want to push them a bit more into that when and how are we going to use it. And also there is the thought that audit should be data driven. So that would mean within our strategy we would talk about getting data from the council and analysing that, which might then drive us to look into certain areas and have audits perhaps a little bit more in depth. So we'll be led by the data, which is, I suppose, a new audit trend, if you like, trying to be data driven. What does the data tell us about what's going on in the organisation? Where do we need to be looking? And how does that give assurance back to the audit committee? So we're quite interested to do some of that over the year. But also talk with management a bit more about our strategies for the different areas of audit. So there has maybe been a theme of cycling audits, but that's not always the best use of audit days and audit time. And if areas are coming out with positive opinions a lot of the time, then maybe we don't need to audit them so often. Maybe it can be a much higher level audit. But there'll be other areas where you have risks, either high operational risk or corporate risk, where they would benefit from a more in-depth review to look at your mitigations and give assurance back to the committee about the management of some of your key risks. So I want to do some work with management about that, so that next time we come, it might be next time we come with less audits but more in-depth audits, very focused in different areas. So I want to do some work around that this year as well. Happy to take some questions.
Thanks. I suppose it's just a distinction between, we have this all the time though with strategic risks and operational risks. And in Appendix 5, under nutrient neutrality, we're saying there that an audit is not proposed, but there is an audit in the 24-25 for nutrient neutrality, but that's an operational audit, I think. So Appendix 4 shows an audit.
We are going to do that.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a joint audit. So
Operational and strategic. Or do you mean nutrient neutrality and what?
it will be strategic because it's
Thank you, Chairman. In Appendix 3, second item, annual governance statement, you say annual assurance provided on evidence to support statements and in-depth review every 3 years, but the number of days allocated doesn't suggest an in-depth review in one of those 3 years.
we've got quite a lot of days in year 2 and 3, but I suggested to senior management we didn't worry too much about that at this stage because we always re-look at everything every year, and therefore the days can change and go up and down. If we were to stick with the 3-year in-depth review, then that would potentially mean that yes, the days in 26-27 would have to go up because as you see they have only got 5, but yes, if we were to do that they would have to go up, and that would get firmed up as the years go by. So I haven't put it up particularly for this time. I could have done it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand straight over to Matthew to go through the detail on this one for us.
Thank you. This is the report we provide to you every year ahead of producing the 23-24 accounts, so that you can review, amend or agree the accounting policies for the 23-24 accounts. And there hasn't been this year any substantial change to those policies compared to the ones that you agreed for the previous year's accounts. But if members have any suggestions, then please now is the right moment to make those.
Members of the committee, any comments? Robert?
I think we discussed, as regards to the commercial property base, we have two properties, Ancient House Museum and the Charles Burrell Museum, that are owned but are they're not specifically referred to as treated differently, but I understand that they are treated differently in the asset valuation.
Yes, they would come within the heritage assets, so the basis of valuation is different. Right, I will.
I might have missed it.
See if I can find it. No, that's something we do provide guidance to the valuer on those assets and how to value them, but we don't. You're right. I can't see that we bring that out in the policies. So,
Well, in that case, can I propose that we add guidance that's existing to the policy?
yeah,
And then we agree that here.
yeah. So that will come back when we give you the draft accounts. So I'll have it in there.
Okay, so I'll add that as a recommendation. What we're going to agree now.
I think that there was a question of materiality, because it is, the value will be, compared to our overall property, very low. It's probably that's why the policy hasn't been in there before.
No, that's fine.
But for completeness,
I mean, as you say,
I think we certainly, I believe, insure the Ancient House Museum, and if something happened to it, it would be a very material issue. So I do think we need to be cognizant of the existence in the policy. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, and thanks for dealing with the two matters as you have. It'll come as no surprise that this is going to be the light entertainment section of your proceedings today after the heavy involvement in audit of various kinds. And it'll also come as very little surprise to members opposite that my accountancy training and background is de minimis. And as a consequence, I do, as I've said many times, sit as the filling in the sandwich here between the two experts on either side. And of course, the principal expert in this case is on my left, and it's Matthew. Treasury management strategy and all its various vagaries is somewhat of a black art for those of us not of a financial disposition. So at this point, Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'm going to slip that baton immediately to my left and allow Matthew to present, unless Alison on my right, who is equally excited by these prospects, may wish to intervene. But judging by the shake of her head, I think Matthew's in the pound seats. So it's over to you, please, Matthew.
Thank you. The Treasury management strategy and the policy really draws together all the implications from the various reports on budget that have been going through Cabinet and will result in the council tax being set later in February. And this report then takes implications of those for our cash flows and what we do with our cash and how we invest it. There have been, and you'll see on page 87, some significant changes this year in the report and some additions. The first of those additions is that this committee asked for an ethical investment policy to be included, and that you will find on page 92. I have passed this policy by our Treasury Manager advisors, one to kind of look at it, and they were happy with the policy, but also to confirm that all our current counterparties are eligible to be invested with under that policy, which they did confirm that. It also makes a point, as we've mentioned at the last committee meeting, we were kind of slightly preempting the passage of the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Overseas Matters Bill, which is shortly will have its second reading in the House of Lords, but that does preclude any council from making a decision about investing in a bank that's based in a foreign country purely on ethical grounds. So we are slightly preempting that. But by the time this policy is in operation, the bill presumably will be close to receiving approval. So that was the ethical investments. I'll pause there in case there's any questions on that area.
For the sake of clarity, do we need to state that this has no influence on the pension fund policies?
I think that's, as pensions are completely separate, and Norfolk Pension Fund is a separate fund, so it sets its own policies.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on paragraph 2 of the, in the red bit, so to speak, ethical considerations. Excuse me. And it talks about the fact that counterparties from countries with which the council may disagree on political or moral issues purely due to this disagreement. The debate that you had, this has come before various other parts of the council previously, as you're well aware, I think, in terms of investment in certain Middle East countries. Although the actual investment party is highly rated credit-wise and everything else, has there been a debate or discussion at the level within the council before this came out in terms of specific countries where we know that there are other issues outside of the monetary issues. If that makes sense. Sorry, perhaps I haven't phrased it very well, but thank you.
I mean, there was some discussion at this committee last time in relation to that, but we had made the point when this bill has come out and prevented the council making decisions about who to invest with particular countries purely on the basis of not agreeing with them on political or moral grounds.
Okay, I mean, I'm happy.
In the forthcoming year, we are expecting returns of around 4.5% on our investments. You'll see there's a whole appendix devoted to the interest rate forecast. We are expecting that interest rates will begin to drop later in the year, and so that will begin to impact on our investments, but they are quite high compared to recent years still. On page 99, you'll see set out there our capital financing requirement, which is a key measure of whether the council needs to borrow. It's a positive capital financing requirement, which means there is an underlying need for the council to borrow to fund its capital investment plans. The approach this council has taken is to borrow internally, so using its cash to fund the capital part of the capital programme. And you'll see on the page 101, the table there sets out what our cash is expected to be over the next 5 years. On the 1st of April 2023, we were at about 19.5 million cash, and that will fluctuate over the next 5 years, but ultimately be slightly lower at just under 18 million by the end of 5 years. So that does give us the capacity to borrow internally for the capital programme and not have to go out to external borrowing at the present time. The other main addition to the policy is Appendix B3, I think it's on page 132 of your report, and that is providing some additional guidance which we felt was necessary because non-financial investments and commercial investments have received a great deal of scrutiny and regulatory interest over the last few years, so we thought some further guidance was needed. So for when members are making decisions, and it sets out on page 134 the principles to be followed when making those sort of investments and the main reasons that the council would make those investments and our attitude, for example, to investing out of area. So we wanted to bring this appendix to the committee for the committee to review and approve, but subsequently, if the committee does approve it, then we would incorporate it in future years into the capital strategy, which is really what it's informing.
Okay, can I just ask a couple of questions on that? Sorry, right, so let me start again. Obviously, there's been some legislation in this area around councils not being able to borrow to invest, and a couple of district councils gone spectacularly bankrupt with absolutely vast debts that sort of didn't exist until they materialised. The first thing is the Cabinet member happy with the proposals in terms?
Yes, Chairman. I think it's a good step forward. As you rightly say, the landscape around which this legislation has been framed has seen some pretty catastrophic consequences of poor investment strategy, lack of foresight, and in particular of councils taking the odd decision to put all their eggs in one basket in a quite substantial way, which is what's caused effectively this legislation handed down through central government. I'm pleased to say that I don't think we have ever been in that position as a council, certainly in my lifetime as a councillor, and we would not wish to get there either. All our investments are fairly broad brush, but we are now reviewing where we are in the light of the whole panoply of concern about finances in local government. And this particular section of the report enables us to be guided very carefully as to how we do and don't take our investments forward and look at them and analyse them, and ultimately it will enable us to determine whether we should or should not be borrowing, and if so, from whom, at what rate and over what period. So no, I'm very happy. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Robert?
Where we borrow from ourselves, do we use bank rate as the basis, or these budgeted figures on page 93, or some other figure?
The advantage of borrowing from ourselves is that we don't pay interest to ourselves. The cost is really that we're not able to invest that cash elsewhere with banks, so we're losing that interest that we otherwise would have got. If that makes sense.
Any comments from members of the committee? David?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment, really. At the last Overview and Scrutiny Commission, I did make a point of congratulating Alison and Matthew and their team, and the work that Phil does as well, in the sense that we have a balanced budget, and we are not borrowing outside of our own resources. And I think that's, in the present climate, I think that's to be highly, highly recommended. And as I say, thanks to your team for coming up with another balanced budget. And I think we're only one of 3 districts, I think, in Norfolk that hasn't got outside borrowing, I think. And I think we should be very, very grateful for that. Thank you.
David?
Just a minor point. So the table 6 that Matthew referred to, the estimated capital, there's a line there, section 106, just that you'll be aware that recent legislation effectively scraps section 106, and it's not clear what future arrangements will be. So just okay. A word of caution against that line.
Any comments on that?
That line is section 1 agreement, section 106 monies which we've already received. Yeah.
Right, okay. Any further comments? No? Right, well, we have 5 recommendations that the Treasury Management Strategy 24... No, hang on. Yes. That the Treasury Management Strategy 24-25 to 26-27 at Appendix A is approved. That the minimum revenue provisions MRP statement contained within an Appendix A, which sets out the Council's policy on MRP, is approved. That the prudential and local indicators and limits contained within Appendix A, and that's tables 1 to 11, are approved. That the investment strategy 24-25, brackets Appendix B, and the detailed criteria included in Appendix B1 is approved, and that the Treasury Management Policy at Appendix B2 is approved.
Sorry, I think you just need to add that the Treasury, the Appendix B3, the investment criteria is also approved. Sorry, that's...
Right, no, and
number 6.
And item 6, that the Appendix B3 be added, be approved as well. So, members, all in favour? Right, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And with that, members, is there anything else you wish to discuss before I close the meeting? There being none, we close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.